One of the areas that we talk about often for women in business particularly is around growing profit. And when it comes to building profit in your business, we want to be able to make that profit work for us. We want to be able to increase our wealth and really start to focus on what are some ways that we can make sure that we're well looked after into the future, and we're thinking differently around how to invest. Which is why, Julie, it's so cool to have you on today, because you work with women, I'm sure, across so many different aspects and, business owners and beyond, to help them understand how to invest in property particularly, so that they can start to have this wealth creation arm coming along. And what I'd love to start with is asking you around, how did you get into this? What was the catalyst for you to start this business, that the property buying business, and now the education business around it? What was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, Vanessa, it was such an interesting time. Way back when, I go back a few years. It was around about 2002, it was 2002, early 2002, when I received a super statement in the mail, and I was devastated. I had less than $30,000 in my super account. And I was, at the time, working full-time as a teacher and raising 2 kids on my own. And I just thought, wow, that's it. I just am headed for the worst little old lady retirement there is, because, if you haven't got super, and I had a few more years to sort of build on it, but I thought, actually, I probably need to do something about that. I can really, I can't sort of live with myself if I do nothing. So at that point, I started to look around at my options, and my parents at that stage had bought their one and only investment property, and that's a whole other story. And I thought, look, if mum and dad can do it, how hard can it be? Maybe I just do that. And looked around and sort of got into investing that way. Bought my very first investment property, still had a mortgage on my own home. And the rest of it didn't change. But the fact that I got into property at that point really sort of turned my life around big time. Yeah.
Wow. And I think that, what I love about that story is that as a woman, whether you're partnered or not, but certainly from my circumstances, I can relate as a single mum. At the time, looking after my own financial security and future, it is pretty scary when you think about, especially around super, because if we take time out of the workforce and all of that kind of thing, and it's about that long-term thinking. And I know that you work with women business owners. So what is it that you notice for them as they're starting? What's their fear around coming into this investment space? Because I know for me, there was a big fear about, I listen to the media that says, oh, it's really dangerous to put your money into investment. You'll get a bad renter, all that kind of stuff. And that fear mongering, but also I didn't have anyone in my circle who had invested in property. And often we look to the people around us for their advice, and they're like, pay your mortgage off, pay your mortgage off. And so what is it that you're noticing around the themes that hold women back, the cycles we need to break around making the move in, like you did all those years ago, into investing in order to be able to build wealth?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Fear is such a good word, because fear drives a lot of what we do and a lot of what we don't do. And I guess fear drove me to take the steps that I did, because I feared being that little old poor lady with nothing and having to sort of try and, I don't know how people exist on a pension. I really don't. So I think the message is that depending on which way fear is driving you, then, take stock, think about what it is that you're most fearful of. And if you're most fearful of ending up being old and poor, then you've got the chance and the choice right now to do something about it. And yes, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Vanessa, that there's people who are around us who can mentor us are very important people, because And they're even more important if they don't make any judgments on what we're trying to do and achieve. But those people are really going to help to drive us forward. And if you've got someone that you know that is going to help to drive your financial wherewithal forward, then yeah, listen to them and help and mentor, with them, help them to show you the way, so to speak. A lot of women, and particularly in business, and people who are not in business and people are in business are two different sorts of people too. Because if you're used to having an income that is going to help you pay the way forward in terms of investing, that's in some ways a lot easier. In business, what we need to do is really look at our cash flow first and foremost. How's that cash flow going to work for us? Because one of the fears is, well, if I am thinking about putting another staff member on, if I'm going to scale my business up, if I'm going to look at, investing as well, how's the cash flow going to work on that? Like, what the heck? That frightens me when I think of it in those terms. And so maybe what we need to do is reframe that whole conversation. And maybe what we need to do is prioritize what it is that we're in business for, what is going to help us with our end goal. If our end goal is retirement, and retirement into a really good retirement with money and the things we want for our retirement, then, maybe set those goals first, prioritize those goals, and don't waver from it. You'll find a way. It's amazing in business, we do find a way, and look for the ways that you can actually, I think, instigate that, put that in place, and then work around how else we do it. Often, women who are entrepreneurs, women who are in business, we are very often motivated by the challenge. And so if we've got that challenge ahead of us, okay, how can we do it? And I love that question because it's very motivating in its own way. It's not, oh, the media told me I can't do it. My friends are telling me to pay off my own mortgage. Oh, I can't afford to do this XYZ. Oh, I've got 2 kids I've got to put through school. We can come up with 5 million ways not to invest in ourselves and our money and where to put our money. I think that what we need to be doing is reframing all of that and saying, what are the most important things? Let's go after that. Let's set some goals, and let's see then how the rest can not necessarily fall into place, because we still have to drive it. We're the business owner, we're the one that makes decisions, but keep going and think of ways that you can keep adding to your business as well as adding to your finances. One way, of course, that can be done is when we invest in property, we're looking at cash flow. And I look at cash flow right across my life, because to me, even in my self-managed super fund, I can't eat capital growth. I can't eat property. What I can use efficiently is cash flow. So in everything that I do, I try and base it on cash flow. Business, cash flow. Lifestyle, how can I cash flow what I'm doing to get into more investments and keep cash flowing. So when I look at property, it has to be working. The numbers have to work so that they're working in my favor. And that means I try very hard not to touch negative gearing. At the moment, with high interest rates, it's really hard to not be negatively geared. But one hot tip, if you're in property investors out there, what you can do is visit your accountant. If you're negatively geared and you're struggling with cash flow, visit your accountant and say, look, what can be done about this? Can we talk about a tax variation? And a tax variation will allow you then to actually get more cash back into your business by not having to pay as much upfront. So instead of getting your refund at the end of the tax year on your negatively geared property, you can claim it every time you pay tax, quarterly, whatever that might be. So that's just a top tip to get more cash flow back into your pocket. That's what I aim to do all the time, Vanessa. more money to Julie.
Yes.
I feel like we've got the podcast title here: cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. And how to get more cash flow using, these wonderful tools, and what great tips already you've shared, Julie. Thank you. I love what you said there as well around, well, I loved everything you said, especially the top tip, but also around understanding your purpose of why you want to do this. It is about setting that goal and working backwards. And for the listeners out there that are thinking, there's so much already said from both of you around the people that you surround yourself with. And there's this whole aspect of see to believe. Now, some people might not have that around them for different reasons. So it's about proactively going and finding. And Julie, I want to do a shout out for your podcast, because there's real life, so many examples even there. So if you're listening and hearing this and thinking, but I don't have those examples of people or women that have done this and that I see myself in, that's another really important aspect of this. Where can I see myself, whether it's the single mom with 2 kids or whatever the scenario might be. For me, it's growing up in housing commission. It's where are the examples? And so if you're thinking that, go and check out Julie's podcast. We're going to put the details in the show notes because there's so many great examples there. And even if you're not, if you have those, still, where else can I find that information? So I also like the practical component that you brought in there, because, I'm curious around, there is so much talk of, well, the interest rates, obviously, and economic climate. And it is so easy to get pulled into that negative spin cycle, the news cycle, to get confused about all the different messaging. And there's so much fear mongering, as there always is. So is there anything else you'd add? I love that practical tip you shared. Is there anything else you'd add in terms of the current climate right now?
Oh, yes. I think that it's, what we tell ourselves is of prime importance. We can tell ourselves, as you just said, Nicky, it's a terrible time to do this, that, and the other. It's a terrible time because of the interest rates, the climate, the economic climate, all the rest of it. When you catch yourself saying those things, I really want you to think about the absolute opposite of that. If I take steps now towards my financial future, where could I end up? Where do I want to end up? What is it that is going to take me there? Because if we're not asking ourselves those questions, we're not even thinking about an answer. So it's all about that mindset piece that, and we've all got them. I've got them too. I've got those little voices that go, maybe you haven't quite made enough this financial year to do X, Y, Z. And I go, actually, no. I've got goals, I've got plans, I'm stepping one foot after the other and I'm heading towards them. So check yourself if you find that you're sort of sliding into that abyss of, I'm not enough, I can't afford it, I don't know how to do it. They're all questions we tell ourselves that are lies, absolute big fat lies. Search for ways to do it. I'll give you an example. I just had a conversation yesterday with a client who about 4.5 years ago, she came to me, single lady, and she said to me, look, Julie, I'm in my 50s and at this rate, I'm going to retire with nothing. I've still got a mortgage on it, my own property in East Lakes. And guess what? She said, guess what? Apart from that, I've got big fat nothing. I won't get an inheritance from anybody, And she said, so I know that I just need to do something. And I've been to the bank. She's a very proactive lady. I've been to the bank. They'll give me $450,000. And she wanted to desperately buy a house in Sydney. Well, it wasn't going to happen. So we basically looked, as a buyer's agent, we look and, we source properties that are going to match criteria, but also fit in cash-wise with her because she's a single lady and she's not always assured of, regular income. So that's what we did. We ended up buying a house just outside of Newcastle. Get this, 4.5 years ago, $385,000. It was a 5-bedroom, a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, double garage home that was just 5 years old. That home now, in today's money, is worth around about $780,000.
Wow.
But it gets better because, and this is what I mean about mindset, after we bought that first property, and we had a couple of issues with tenants, but the tenants worked out fine. And that's another thing with investing in anything. Don't be prepared for, be prepared, I should say, for things sort of going this way, that way, a little bit which way, but, it all works out in the end. And if it doesn't, reach out to someone who's investing who can help you, because knowledge is power. Within the next 3 months, she'd gone back to that same bank, and I don't actually recommend you necessarily go to banks, but she loved her St. George bank manager, and I don't know, they may have had a thing, I don't know, but anyway, she God love her, she said, I've been back to the bank and they've just pre-approved me for $270,000. And I went, oh my goodness, what are we going to buy for that? I said, great, let's go. And she'd already put half of my fee, which is my retainer fee, into my account that morning. She said, oh, by the way, I've already put you.
No pressure.
Let's go.
Love it.
So don't you love clients like that? But it was her mindset. She said, okay, where are we going? She trusted me 100%, which was, it's so incredibly gratifying when someone trusts you that much. And so we ended up, the next one we ended up buying in Ballarat before Ballarat went off like a cracker. And then within 3 months of that, she'd gone back to the bank.
Oh, wow.
Like I said, she was just, this is my future. She had plotted the goal. She said, this is my future. I'm not going to retire poor. I'm going to hammer this until, I get what I want in terms of her portfolio. So we bought property number 3, and then I said, no, we're stopping now and we're not doing any more. So she has now a sizable portfolio, but fast forward 4.5 years, she called me up the other day and she said, you wouldn't let me buy number 4. And now I'm ready to buy number 4. And I said, let's go. So she went back to the bank manager, and she's been pre-approved for $280,000. And now, of course, 4.5 years later, it's going to be like, oh my goodness. But we will find a way, and there will be something good for her, and it will cash flow correctly, because that's what we do. The prime, I guess, to answer your question, Nicky, it's really about let's have a look at what can be done. Now, not all of us are like this gorgeous lady and just power through. Some are, and that's where we get some really good results. But yeah, I just think we need to be telling ourselves better stories. Women in particular, we tend to put things aside or let someone else handle them. And if it's a male partner, then that can sometimes not work well in our favour. I think that just we need to reframe it, keep moving forward, and make sure that we've set those goals and we're just heading after them as best we can.
There is so much gold in that we can transfer everything you talked about around mindset and taking action and really focusing on what our goals are, what our vision is, and where we want to go. And that can be applied directly to business as it can to investing, and, that's in any area of our lives. And I love that example, because when you are so clear on what it is you want, when you worked away from the pain of the future old lady kind of sitting in a rocking chair or something in a shared house, to I want to have that wealth. I want to create that wealth. Because why do we go in business? We go into business because we're great at what we do. We want to help others, but also there's got to be an element in there of we want to be profitable. We want to be able to support ourselves. And for me in particular, sort of heading towards retirement in the next 10 years, I want to have a lifestyle that I enjoy. I want to be able to have an inheritance for my children. I want to be able to feel financially safe and secure. And you're not going to get there by sitting in that space that you talked about, listening to all the negativity and finding all the reasons why you can't. I think in business, we also do that. If we hit a problem, it's like, right, come on, let's reconnect back to what we are here for, what we want to achieve, and let's start taking action and getting help to do that from the people who can help us the most. So, so many great golden takeaways from just that example alone. I did want to ask though, so when it comes to, you mentioned about sometimes women abdicate to their partner, or it could be their accountant or their bookkeeper. You know, that's what I notice in this bury your head in the sand, I don't want to know my numbers kind of space. But when it comes to actually investing, tell me, what are the stats for women investing in property compared to, say, men or couples or whatever investing in property?
Yeah, that's a great question. There have been some recent studies done that around about 29%, so not many, 29% of women will invest independently. Women invest very differently to men. We are quite measured in how we invest. We like to be perhaps a little bit more conservative. And one of the benefits of that is that we tend to hold on for the long term. Men, not all men, but men tend to, it's all a bit of a competition, and let's buy it and flick it and do all the things with it, and which you can end up with chunks of money along the way. But my professional opinion is that you actually don't end up with long-term wealth as a result of buying, flipping, and what have you. The real wealth that we see, and I'll right at the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned my parents had their one and only property, which they purchased in the 1980s for about $180,000 in good old Borkham Hills, Sydney, in the West. And it is a 3-bedroom, single bathroom tile home on 700 odd square metres, big enough block to actually put a duplex on. They got to a point in their life where they really, a lot was beyond them, and they kind of went, I think we're just going to sell that investment property and put it in a term deposit, basically. And I've kicked myself every day that I didn't say to them, look, I'll manage it for you. Because when they sold it, I think they sold it for about $495,000 back in 2009. And I looked it up the other day on RP data, and of course that property is worth 1.64 million.
Wow.
And so the story here is, for all the listeners, that if you start to build assets, and there'll be times where you will grit your teeth with that thing, and you'll say, the tenant's this, or the cash flow's that, or the interest rates are crap, and all the rest of it. But if you hold that thing for 20 years, or max, even not sell it, that's where real wealth is created. And imagine back in the 80s, if they bought, not that people did back then, but 2, 3 or 4 of those in the western suburbs. I mean, wow. That's so you get my point that asset acquiring and asset building are really important. Holding the assets for long term, really important. Another great spin-off, of course, is that when our kids see us investing, they understand how it works, and they say, like I did, Mum can do it. How hard can this be? I'll give it a try. And what they're doing is actually, learning about how it's done. People who say, I'm going to give my kids this and I'm going to give them $500,000, that's great. But I don't ever aspire to do that for my children. In fact, I never have. I've always said, watch how it's done, and helped along the way, not with cash, but with equity of property. But basically, there's lots of ways to build wealth when it comes to this, and having different income streams as well, I think, is really important. So making sure that, it's not just one particular type. I'm not a shares person, but I'm going to learn shares even at my tender age, because I figure I've got at least another 20 years worth left to me. And I think shares can probably do pretty well in 20 years. So I've got a great friend who had a property portfolio of 16. She's sort of whittled that down and she's stacked a lot into shares because she now loves shares. She's probably got a balanced portfolio, if all truth be known. And basically, she will be my mentor. So
Amazing.
grab a mentor, keep going, and income streams will set you up for life and also set your kids up as well.
I also love in this, one of the questions I kind of had going into this was, which you've answered in multiple ways, is this piece around when is the right time to start? And it actually is now, because it doesn't matter what I'm taking from this conversation is it doesn't matter what is going on in any area, really. If we start now, I feel like there's a lot of reflection of, back in the day and how lucky they were. And if only we could be there and da, 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 da. But like, that's not reality and we can't turn the clock back. So do we want to be in this position and saying the same thing in 10 years time, in 20 years time? If only I remember that podcast I listened to with Nicky, Ness and Julie, if only I'd taken action then, where would I be today? So don't get bogged down in the detail of the challenges. There will always be a challenge. That's the other thing. Whether that's interest rates or whatever it is, or cash flow, there's always going to be a challenge to overcome. And we've got the right support around you, the right people, then you can find the right strategies to overcome them. And I love this piece. What a great reminder, long-term, hold long-term, like wealth creation is what we're talking about, not short-term or shorter term. It's, invest and hold, whether that's shares, whether that's property. Love it. So, so good. So, so good. So Julie, Ness, before I ask the final question, is there anything else that you want to pick Julie's brain about? Any other
on this
burning desire, burning questions?
But I think we have covered so much already, and there's a lot of valuable information in there. And I just sort of want to acknowledge Julie for being my mentor in this space and helping me along the way, and really assisting with shifting that mindset and creating that vision. And I know you're huge on strategy, like what's the strategy behind, what is it you're going for, as are we when it comes to business. And I just wanted to acknowledge and say thank you for the help that you've given me and so many other people along the way. And that generational thing, being able to bring my son along that journey when I was learning from you was pretty awesome. So to have I think he was like 19 at the time, and he was out there checking with mortgage brokers to see, how much could he borrow and what could he invest in, and made a decision to hold it at 19 till he's 25 and then get investing. So what you're saying in relation to us being role models for others is, and especially the next generation coming through, whether it be our own children or they could be grandchildren, nieces or nephews, or just people, friends with children. It's just so good to be able to give them that example of, for me, I was in my 50s when I bought my first investment property, to say, you do that now, look how your wealth creation could actually grow so much more quickly. So don't underestimate the power of us taking action in our businesses to grow profit, and then what we do with that profit and what impact that has around that role modeling and experience for the younger generation.
And to add to that, even, God, that's so powerful, Ness, so, so powerful. And as a woman showing other women, that you can do this. Yes, it's the next generations and it's the people that are surrounding us. Ness, I think you mentioned you were kind of one of the first in your kind of sphere. That has a ripple effect as well. So, yeah, really powerful. So much in this conversation. I love where we started. Julie started with thinking differently about investing. There were so many great quality questions that were shared throughout today that I really encourage you as the listener to go back and listen again and write down those questions. I also think a big thing here is you don't have to know how. That can hold people back. It might seem big, it might seem overwhelming. Love the reflection question around what is driving that fear, but you don't have to know how. Reach out to people like Julie, reach out. There are so many support networks, communities, people that want to help and give this information. And of course, Julie is an incredible resource and person to go to, which we will share all of her information in the show notes. Julie, is there anywhere particular that people can find you before I close out with our final action? Anywhere particular they can come and stalk you? Friendly stalk, of course.
Yeah, I probably hang out a fair bit on LinkedIn, and I've got a few different websites, as well as working with investors, and I'm also now upskilling buyers agents as well. I think I'm the kind of person that loves to make sure that whatever we're doing in our businesses, whatever we're doing in life, we're ethical and honest and doing it in the best way possible. So my give back to the real estate industry is to start skilling buyers agents basically to be the best that they can be as well. And that comes with education. So again, the education piece is really important. But by all means, people can connect with me on LinkedIn. Certainly go to my website, apisolutions.com.au. You'll be able to find a lot more about investing and my buyer's agent service there. And I'd love to talk to women who are, if you haven't got a way forward, reach out to me, please. Just let's talk about it. Let's just see what can be done, because I'm telling you right here, right now, no matter how bad your situation is, something can be done.
Oh,
yep, so true.
How wonderful to hear that. So don't get stuck in the thinking. If you're curious, if you want to change your circumstance, just reach out, full stop. Don't get stuck in the thinking, don't get stuck in the how, all of that. So we like to finish out every podcast episode with a question. We love being able to give a practical action that our listeners can take in the next 24 hours. So what would you say that action could be to help break this cycle of getting stuck? Maybe it's stuck in not taking the first step, the first, action to really start investing and get on that way to building wealth. Yes,
I think what would be a great start is to write down what it is that you actually want. It's a hard question. I struggle with it sometimes. What is it that you want in life? What do you want your life to look like? Make a list. It doesn't matter, just write everything down. And then money does fix a lot of things. So then what we need to do is really look at, well, okay, if it's going to be pay off your own mortgage or buy an investment property or, double your business, whatever it's going to be, then get some other help around that. Figure it out in your own head and then get out of your own head and then basically ask. The power of asking is huge, and you will get answers if you ask, and that's your way forward.
Love that. It's not getting stuck in the how. It's what you want that end game to look like, and dream it up. Like, get excited about it too when you do that. And then reach out to Julie.
And ask. I love that. It is about asking. I love what you said. Figure it out in your head and then get out of your head. Because if we're staying in our head, that's when we start to perhaps spiral back out of, I don't think that's good enough. Am I good enough for that? Or is that achievable? And all the, how am I going to get there? So that's such a great action. Get clarity on what it is we want in our lives. And I wonder, how often do we ask that question? How often do we actually sit back and ask that question? So thank you so much, Julie. I love talking to you. I've been on your podcast. I'm so grateful that you've now come and shared this with our audience. And yes, definitely listening to her podcast and get inspired by women who have followed that journey of investing. Thank you, and happy listening. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
ladies.